Chair, there's a third one, if I may, that just came now, a call from Mr. Sitole, who says he has to attend tourism today and he will attend transport tomorrow.
That is the third apology.
Chairperson, on a point of
Thank you very much.
Honorable Mangu is far too young to be going to the doctor.
Yeah, we normally experience this thing when we work with younger honorable members. So we understand that. Thank you very much. Let's allow at this moment in time a welcome from all the people who are with us today here. That will include those who are going to submit. That will also include department. That will also include officials. You are warmly welcome to this meeting. Don't say I did not recognize you. Before I continue, allowing Sakelicha to submit, let me hear Honorable Hansing, I see your hand is up.
Good morning, Chairperson and colleagues. Chairperson, while we are dealing with apologies, in advance, I would like to apologize for Friday, since it is not possible for me to be present on Friday. I render my apology in advance. Thank you, Chair.
Did you hear Honorable Satlulo earlier on Honorable Hansinger?
No, Chairperson, I did not hear that, and I do not acknowledge any other remarks around age other than from my...
Okay, well, thank you. All right, Sakelicha, are you available and present in the meeting?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, good morning. Is that Gerard van Onselen?
This is Piet Leroux. My colleague Gerard van Onselen is also online, but I may draw him into the conversation if it's necessary, but with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'll handle our presentation.
Thank you very much, Pete. You are given a platform to handle your presentation, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and committee members and others present, we have submitted a written commentary, and this presentation serves only to offer additional remarks. I will not deal, of course, substantively with all matters in the bill, but there are some issues that I would like to lift out, and perhaps we could discuss further. Now, let me start by saying that we find agreement with the memorandum to the bill and the bill itself, which says that the South African framework of transportation is dominated by state-owned enterprises. And it is certainly true that these state-owned enterprises in terms of rail, AXA, the ports authorities, all these form a substantial part of the transport network in South Africa. There are still significant parts of the private sector outside of that, just to think of the trucking business and other logistics operations in South Africa. But it is certainly true that there is a remarkable domination by state-owned enterprises of the transportation sector. We differ, though, with the memorandum to the bill in that these sectors are not. Let me just find this point, and I can point you to this. So this is in paragraph 1 of the memorandum. It says that, in particular, the South African institutional framework of transportation is dominated by large SOEs who have a very high degree of market power over either the infrastructure or services which they operate. The only difference I have with that, except for the remark, of course, that there is still a substantial private sector, is that these SOEs do not exercise market power, but they exercise state power. And they are by legislation or other statutory measures in a position of state power, not in a position of market power. I think that's just an important clarification as we go into this discussion. Although it is certainly, we certainly find that this is a laudable recognition and a point of departure for the drafters of the bill to think about how can we address this problem of SOE domination. And insofar as the bill attempts to open up SOE controlled infrastructure, for example, in rail and so on, this is to be welcomed. Now, there are one or two problems that I'd like to point out. I think from a bird's eye view, there are two main problems to the way the bill is currently set up. The one is that it attempts to maintain these SOEs and direct their price and other behavior subject to the regulator and other bureaucratic interventions. This is certainly not an obvious answer to how to deal with SOEs. Other forms of dealing with SOE domination in any sector is, of course, privatization, or other forms of concessions or licensing of these SOEs, or some form of pro-market interventions, while regulation of price controls and introducing regulators. These are ways of maintaining SOE state control over a particular enterprise. And that is a problem in the bill. The second big problem is that it attempts to bring the private sector now under regulatory or bureaucratic intervention. And so the bill is very explicit in that it grants the minister the ability to declare that any entity, any market, any facility, be it public or private, becomes subject to the act, subject to his discretion. There are a few limitations to that, but in the end, it is a procedural process, and then if he deems it, the powers are certainly wide enough for him to be deemed able to declare any market, entity, or facility part of this regulatory enterprise. And so we end up with a bill that not only does not remove the state dominance in the transport sector, but goes further and enables and empowers the minister to bring into the scope of regulatory control, into the scope of state intervention in the transport sector, potentially the whole of the private sector, which is still substantial. Right, so these are two main design problems as we see it in the bill. I can point specifically to Article 4.2, Section 4.2 of the bill, for which is the one that gives the minister this discretionary power, subject to the limitations after that, but nevertheless within his power. Now, there's also in the bill reference to price controls in several places, punitive or otherwise. These price controls seem to be directed not only at the public sector or the state-owned enterprises, but very specifically is written such that it can also control price setting and price control within the private sector. And so this is to convert what remains of the market into bureaucracy, because prices are very important. Free price setting is very important, since without unusual levels of profit or loss, there will be no reallocation of resources, and certainly not at the speed demanded by a market generating or those losses or profits. And so we have this risk, and that's not a risk, it's a certainty, that when we introduce price controls in the private sector, we're going to entrench existing firms within the sector, and we're going to prevent entry into that sector because we're preventing unusual levels of profit. And when we prevent unusual levels of profit, we don't enable the kind of risky investments necessary to enter the sector. But we're also going to entrench loss-making entities, and so they're going to be operating at less efficiency, because they don't face this competition and because we maintain potentially abnormal levels, abnormally high prices, because they are not forced down by market competition. And so the notion of maintaining normal levels of profit, and that being the purpose of price controls, is a mistaken purpose, and it will lead to lessening of competition and a less efficient transport sector. Right, that is as far as price controls and the reference to normal profit goes. Let me see if I can point you to an example of the normal profit reference. Just opening that up. So I think a proper way to get to reference and understand the influence of this price control thinking is to point you again at the memorandum for the memo that's in 3.3.1 of the memorandum to the objectives of the bill, where this reference to normal levels of profit is made, not only in the bill itself. Then moving on to another important element of regulation that there's a preponderance of this in legislation and bills currently, but this does not make it, this does not by itself justify, of course, this, and I'm referring here to the purposes and the scope in the bill of expanding what is called, I don't think in the bill especially, Black economic empowerment, but what amounts to that. For example, in the purposes of the Act in that's Article 3, subsection 2B, it says that the purposes of this Act are to be pursued in a manner that promotes the achievement of equality, etc. And while this is certainly understandable that it is there, the problem with this is that it is now making the whole idea of regulating the private sector and setting price controls subject to something which is a very political objective, and that is the transformation of the sector in terms of race. I know that it is not written in this way, but this is the way that it is currently understood if we look at developments in the competition bills, competition legislation, and many other pieces of legislation in the country. And so this is a second problem. I can add that to this Article 38, which proposes that the regulator must carry out the functions and exercise the powers assigned to it by or in terms of this Act. They must exercise economic regulation of transport facilities and services in line with national strategic objectives. Now, this is, of course, what government sets as the strategic objectives, and government is very clear in many areas of economic regulation that it considers it a strategic objective to try to change the ownership and management of the owners of enterprises, or the management of those enterprises, according to criteria of race, subject to the national demographics of the country. And so this is, it is concerning to us that this enables the regulator and the minister to introduce not explicitly provided for political objectives into the way that they set prices or regulate. And it will, if the minister or the regulators chose to do so, it would be justifiable in the current wording. Then finally, I could add that costs here, of course, the cost of the bill is suggested to be borne by the regulated entities. Now, of course, the regulated entities will initially probably be state-owned enterprises. I'm thinking of Transnet, AXA, and so on. But it is it is quite possible that because the bill also and the memorandum makes a provision for light or heavy regulation, for rolling out or rolling back regulation, depending on whether the regulator considers the transport sector, or the minister considers the transport sector competitive or compliant with strategic objectives. It is certainly foreseeable that many what is currently considered to be private entities, not explicitly subject to a regulatory and price setting regime as is proposed here, will become to some extent regulated. And as soon as it becomes to some extent an entity subject to this act, then there will be costs to it. So the committee I would be interested to hear how the committee interprets this. But from a reading of the bill, it seems likely that many entities currently in the private sector will become subject to further levies in order to fund the regulatory entity, which can be substantial. If we look at the model implied for regulating and price setting at NERSA and other places, but NERSA, the National Energy Regulator, is a good example of something that does not function very well, even if it is limited, that model, to a state-owned enterprise. In this case, it's limited to a state-owned entity because the private sector is effectively legislated out of competing with ESCOM. But nevertheless, it is possible to foresee a very costly regulatory regime borne by a private sector. And as we head into a post-lockdown world, certainly, hopefully so, with severe economic damage, I think it is of the utmost importance that we try and generate economic growth and that we limit the costs of doing business. And so I would be interested in the committee's view on this, but this is also a cause for concern. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee and other participants, you will see that I have not dealt with every aspect of this. I have referred initially to aspects of this that we would certainly welcome, which is the idea and the acknowledgement that there is an unusual domination of many transport infrastructure in the country by state-owned entities. We were surprised, however, to find in the bill that much of the access regime that is foreseen, or and the measures supposed to be taken to change this, actually entrenches those SOEs in the sector and creates a very rigid regulatory regime. And so while we certainly hope and would welcome if the act is interpreted and the minister and the regulator continues to interpret this in a way to license or make concessions, introduce concessions on state entities, or even privatize, that seems unlikely from a reading of the bill and the memorandum. And so I went then and proceeded and pointed out some crucial problems with the bill. And particularly, first, that it attempts to maintain these SOEs, and second, that it attempts to bring the private sector under regulation, which will cause several problems, not the least of which is that it will entrench existing role players and limit the entries, notwithstanding other intentions. But in practice, these things always limit the flexibility of entry to especially small enterprises and new entities, which could later come to dominate the sector, but it excludes challenger enterprises. Mr. Chairman, those concludes my remarks that I would like to add to what we introduced in the written submission, and I'm sure will be complemented in many other areas with further submissions by other participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pitleru. Second, Licha. It has got nothing to do with the liquor.
It simply means a business league. It's just an old name that we chose for it, but it simply means a business league. We're an association, Mr. Chairman, of about 12,000 businesses across the country, across the sectors as well. So it's not an employers organization. We have a very simple purpose, which is to improve and support a business environment conducive to the welfare of everybody and all the communities around our members.
Thank you very much. You'll get to know about the committee's view at a later time. I'm afraid to say for now, the committee is going to ask you some questions so that later on, when they formulate a view, at least we shall have heard you and try to interpret you the way you interpret issues. And let me say right from the onset, we appreciate that you took time to come and talk to us about your concerns, your views. We do appreciate that point. At this moment in time, let me allow honorable members who wants clarity seeking questions, comments, questions. The floor is yours. Let me see hands. Mr. Pitler is ready for you. The first hand is that one of Honorable Mangu. Yeah, I don't see any other hand. I see a face. Oh, Lawrence McDonald is the second. I see somebody with a sign of chiefs here. I don't know what that means. Okay, let me take him. Honorable Makosini. Thank you. You'll be number 3. I think those are the 3 hands for now.
You have muted yourself, Chair. I don't know if I've been given the right or not.
It happens on a Tuesday morning, Jambas. Don't be too harsh on me. You are given an opportunity, sir.
I was just checking. Thank you so much. Thank you to the presentation from Sakeliga. Well, firstly, I think I need to register my disappointment in that most of the things that the presenter presented are not in his document. They were not even in a presentation for us to be able at least to follow. In the presentation, I think the organization went on to say how much the bill doesn't address what and what. And as you rightfully said, Chair, our approach is to get as much contributions towards enriching this process as possible. And unfortunately, your presentation doesn't really assist us unless you are able to resubmit if the committee so agrees to do that. We obviously would like to hear from you, especially if you represent what you say you are representing. So that is just the slight disappointment on the first start, because we are unable even later to honestly look at what you are saying you are submitting in comparison to what other people have submitted and take a view, because your submission in writing and what you've said now are not exactly the same. You, in the main, in your submission, I think you repeat most of the things that have been documented in a paper that you quote by a certain Professor Miller and Dr. Miller, which we appreciate, but we would love to hear your views documented and your recommendations, if you have any, of whatever possible amendment or enrichment of the process. So it makes it very difficult to engage. Safe to say, one question is, you say your bill, you said the bill paves the way for greater private sector participation, which you say you support. I don't know if you could explain a little bit to us what you mean, and maybe exactly referring to the draft bill, which exactly section are you talking to? Thank you, Chairperson.
The following on my list, thank you, Honorable Mangu. If you can just remove your hand from those who are to speak. Thank you very much. Honorable McDonald will be the next speaker.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. I would like to thank Mr. Leroux for his presentation. I want to add my voice to the chorus of Honorable Manchu. It would have been most probably very much easier for us to follow the presentation if we had a proper presentation from the Sake Liga. To go back to the presentation that they've sent us, I'm a bit concerned that the presentation that was sent to us was a loaded gun. They said to us that they can't come here in good faith, they support the bill, but then they note, we reserve our right to consult our legal representatives and challenge the bill at a later stage if we determine that the bill infringes on the rights and interests of our members. Chair, I think that is coming to the party a little bit with an opinion that this is just another route that we have to jump through, and if we're not happy, we're going to take you to court. And I'm a bit deterred about that attitude. Then mostly of the presentation is about how we should not protect previously disadvantaged communities and previously disadvantaged businesses and state-owned enterprises because that is not good for competition. Chair, we have got policies on BEE. Sake Liga will just have to get into line and follow the policies of this country. They are not above the law. They need to follow the things that have been proclamated in this country to make sure that everybody has the right to do business, but we have to make sure that the BEE component of this country grows so that we can rectify the wrongs of the past, Chair. I mean, in one of their memos that they sent out in 2019, the Sake Liga says to their members, they must not use SAA. So what next is going to happen? They're going to send to their members, don't use Prasa, don't use Transnet, don't use this to destroy our state-owned enterprises. Chair, I will not be party to something that the right wing wants to change the way that the South African business is done in this country. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Lawrence McDonald. Please lower your hand on the screen. We now have your contribution. Let's take the next speaker, Honorable Makosini Chabangu.
Thank you, Chair. Let me also appreciate the presentation. Really, it was short and not really thought-provoking. In his presentation, he made mention of the fact that the enterprises or SOEs exercises the state power instead of the market power. Is this not one of the main concerns that lead the SOS to collapse? I would like him to expatiate on this matter and add his contribution towards the bill. Thank you, sir.
Gordon Bondaminier, thank you for that.
Thank you.
On that note, let's take the honorable member whose hand is now up, the Honorable Hunsinger.
Thank you, Chairperson. In fact, my hand was up electronically when you asked for hands to be raised for questions, but thank you for the opportunity, Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Piet Leroux. And I haven't had the opportunity till now, but congratulations with your recent appointment as CEO of Sake Liga, which is about, 2 months ago, I think. And thank you for your submission, taking time to work through the bill in its current form and for taking time to prepare input. My question to you, sir, as representing Sake Liga is, did you circulate the bill amongst your members and then compile input from your membership, which you presented here, or are these your ideas? My next question relates to a piece of legislation which I'm sure you are acquainted with, which is governed and executed under the authority of the Competitions Commission. Would you say that private sector and other entities are subject to this act? And if so, would you say that there is a particular environment within the transport sector that falls outside of the ambit of the current Competition Commission? And would you not think that that which might fall outside of the ambit of the Competition Commission should be regulated? Or do you find it fine as it is? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Dank je, achtbare leden.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you. My hand was also.
Okay, no, thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, Chair, Mr. Leroux. Am I correct? I only want to make a comment. Am I correct by saying that the Sakeliga welcome the fact that the bill extends the way for greater private sector participation in the transport sector, but your main concern is price control? Prices are the outcome of a market process, which is an interaction between suppliers and demanders in an open market. What we need in South Africa, sir, Chairperson, is the minimum government imposed restrictions. We have seen what happened to the SOEs in South Africa. I only want to remind you, in the days of apartheid, there was a law, they called it the Road Transport Council. If I was the owner of a shop and I stay away 200 kilos from Port Elizabeth, I can go to the wholesaler and buy my goods, but I was not allowed to make use of my own 8-ton truck. I was forced to make use of the railway. So I think we must stay away from government interference. Thank you, Chairperson.
What's your question?
Thank you, Honorable May. I'm not going to interpret what we have said. I think it's very clear. And I guess these were the hands that wanted to contribute on the presentation by Mr. Pete Leroux. Sir, we're coming back to you with all the clarity-seeking questions. Let me just add before you say something, congratulations also from my part as chairperson for your election as a CEO, I'm told, of the Sakeliga Business League. We will work hand in glove to shape business in this country, at least in this sector of transport. Otherwise, back to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, I would let me deal with some of the procedural or non-substantive questions first, and then with some of the other questions. The first is that, if with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I will convert the congratulations on my 2 months as Sakeliga CEO into a congratulations on my 3-year anniversary. But I appreciate the thought nonetheless. And then the second matter is there seems to be an expectation by the committee that a presentation or input has to be on PowerPoint. Mr. Chairman, there's also such a thing as death by PowerPoint. And I felt that the issues that I wish to amplify or comment on today, and even add to our submission, is succinct enough that it is better presented in the way I did, and this is certainly an acceptable way of doing so, and it is also an acceptable way in Parliament and all parliamentary committees. It is a standard practice for presentations and commentary not to necessarily be accompanied by PowerPoint. Another matter here is whether what I said deals with what was submitted. Mr. Manku feels that it does not deal with what was submitted. This is not incorrect. Very much of the written submission that was there refers to the issue of pricing regulation, refers to the influence of the state-owned enterprises on transport infrastructure in the country. In fact, I could quote some of it, but our written submission is also not that long. There's certainly much overlap. But what we then do in a presentation, and I would be surprised if this were not to be appreciated. I certainly always appreciate it if somebody provides me with information, is that when a written memorandum or a written submission is followed up by in a personal setting such as this, then there is no sense in just repeating verbatim what was written before. And so it was certainly my intention to expand on the document provided. And one of the questions, perhaps the only substantial one that was not in our referred to in our written submission, is the issue of Black economic empowerment or transformation, which I will deal with regarding one of the questions soon. There's a question by Mr. Manku regarding any specific recommendations. If I can make two specific recommendations, well, three, let's make three. The first then, well, it flows directly from my presentation. The first is that the bill considers and this is the part we welcome, that the bill considers expanding the access regime proposed for the private sector to include concessions and other forms of private running of infrastructure, not only linking on, for example, rail infrastructure funded privately to the existing state-owned rail system, but opening up even parts of the existing state-owned enterprises to being privately run. This is not explicit in the bill, and we would propose that that be introduced. The second proposal, and this flows from the second problem that I suggested the bill suffers from, is that the bill removes the, or at least severely circumscribes the ability of the regulator and the minister to bring under the bill's price setting regime the private sector. There is no justification, and I would say it is unwise for the bill to allow for price setting of private entities. This ties in with the question by Mr. Hunsinger regarding the Competition Commission. I think that it is not necessary for there to be attempts to introduce competition or regulate pricing outside of what is already in the competition legislation. That legislation is problematic as well, but this is not the place for dealing with that. And I would suggest that it is not wise for this bill to try and regulate private sector pricing. All right, so that should be removed from the bill if I have to spell it out. Then the third suggestion I would want to make is that the bill does not try to anticipate the introduction of the transformation objectives into the bill. It is true that there are legislation such as the Black Economic Empowerment Act and other forms of legislation that deals with the attempts by under government policy to create a certain arrangement by race of ownership and control in the economy and so on. The place for dealing with that is in that act, and that is where we can debate it. And we should guard against the preponderance of inserting various objectives into different parts of the regulatory scheme. It complicates it, and it is not, we would say, not appropriate. Black economic empowerment, as we have seen it, is probably one of the most harmful policies currently in the country, because it is not successful in its stated attempt insofar as that is to improve the lives of people in South Africa. I'm sure that there are some people that benefit from it, but it is widely stated, not by me, but by many commentators, black, white, or people in South Africa, who find the current black economic empowerment regime dissatisfying, and they are concerned that it is more harmful than not. I can also refer us here to the findings by Asimoglu and by Hausman, who were the panel appointed by then President Thabo Mbeki in 2007, a special advisory panel, who found and who called in their paper, this is on Treasury's website, they called Black Economic Empowerment an open-ended tax on capital. And they recognize that there are different elements to Black economic empowerment, but some elements of this they call an open-ended tax on capital. And it is problematic because we see that as we have come to know it, Black economic empowerment has become a way of politically allocating capital instead of entrepreneurially or consumerally allocating capital. And this is a sensitive topic to talk about, but it is certainly not a unique position of Sakeliga that Black economic empowerment is a questionable policy, and at least in many cases is more harmful than beneficial. And so if I may make a specific recommendation, it is that this bill do not seek to achieve that, but seeks to achieve a successful transport sector that is to the benefit of everybody in South Africa. That is a simple enough objective, and that focus should be on opening up access to the state-dominated sector of transport in South Africa and not the private sector. That's not where the bottlenecks lie. Then there was the reference to SAA and Sakeliga's previous, and that was my suggestion to our members that Sakeliga as members should not make use of SAA. That is a loss-making entity, and loss-making entities are threatening the fiscal stability of this country. I can think of no greater way of sabotaging the fiscal position in this country than running up state-owned entities that make losses like SAA do, and that threatens all the political objectives of not only this government, but all members of parliament. I'm sure none of them would like to see a fiscal crisis in South Africa. So if anything, that suggestion by me to our members not to use SAA is probably quite a patriotic and ethically acceptable thing to do. And not that I think my suggestion to them is so influential. I think that the fact that SAA is not even flying at the moment tells us all we need to know about what people are doing out of their own accord in this regard. Mr. Chabanku requested a comment on SOEs and the question of state power and asked me to elaborate. It's a very interesting question, and I'm sorry that he didn't expand on it a little bit more, so I hope that I elaborate in the way he had it in mind. I was referring to the question of state power of SOEs in relation to the use of the phrase market power in the memorandum on the objectives of the bill. That is in paragraph 1.1. It says that there's a very high degree of market power over infrastructure or services by the SOEs. Just as speaking as an economist, which is my vocation, it is not technically correct to, I think, to refer to state-owned entities having market power as much as they have state power, because they are protected with or without merit. That's another question. But the fact is that they are in the position they are in because of strategic objectives and decisions by government, and that gives them, by license, of course, of the state, that gives them state power. And so we see by virtue of that state power, for example, the way SAA operated over the last 10 or so years, we saw the failure and the bankruptcy of many private entities that tried to enter the domestic airline market, low-cost airline market. One of the reasons they ran into bankruptcy and other problems is, of course, because of the state power by a subsidized entity in that market. And so I'm concerned about the state power of the SOEs and the fact that this state power is, for example, in the SAA case, is proven. It's very clear that that state power actually was to the jeopardy of a successful transport sector. Let me see if I refer, or maybe to Mr. Mayor reference. I think that the South African government before the ANC has many very, very problematic and actually terrible policies of state control and regulation of the market. And it goes back many decades. Of course, because Eskom is today a state-owned enterprise because of Mr. Jan Smuts in 1912 or so, when he started nationalizing the energy sector. Before then, it was privately provided by mining companies, etc. But one particularly egregious example of regulation by the National Party comes up as the Eggs Price Control Board. There were price control boards for many things, including the price of eggs. And I would very much advise against anything that resembles such a nitpicking and intervention in the sector and trying to regulate prices. And the problem with the bill is, and this ties in with the very specific recommendations that we have, is that the regulator, the powers of the regulator and the minister should not extend to setting prices in the private sector. That is a Pandora's box, and I would recommend against it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I addressed the first round. If there are second rounds, I hope I addressed everything.
No, thank you, Mr. Pidleru. We have heard you, and we want to appreciate the open way with which you dealt with questions. I'm sure with time we'll learn from each other as we move on. Economists and politicians, practicalities on the ground, and try to balance that moving forward. I think we have heard you on behalf of business. Please keep an eye on this bill as it progresses. Would appreciate it that at the end of it all, everybody should say, in this bill, this is what I contributed, whether it's a business or an individual. I think that's the aim of us holding these public hearings. We do not take light of the inputs you have made here today, to send our appreciation to your business league members for having taken time to speak to the portfolio committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zwane, and all the best to the committee.
Thank you. You have a beautiful day and a prosperous future as a CEO of a business league moving forward. Thank you very much. Honorable members, the next presentation takes me back where I used to work. I see the presentation is to be made by Mineral Council of South Africa. And I see the face on my screen. I can't see the name of the face. Baba.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, esteemed colleagues. I'm Christian Tefu from the Minerals Council. Yes, Christian.
What is the surname?
Tefu. Yeah, so there's a Lisibana Tefu that's always on TV. I think I'm somehow related to him because of my facial features, but personally, I've never met him. He should be probably the elder members of the family would know him.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, thank you. Having greeted you, let's allow you a platform to the Mineral Council of South Africa
Yes.
What is your contribution in terms of the shaping of this bill? Let me allow you that space.
Yes. I just want to put it on record that I got to the former Chamber of Mines in about 2007 and worked there with a gentleman called Dick Creer. That guy is Creer, but he liked to be called Dick Kruger. And since about then, 2007, we've had multiple consultations with the Department of Transport in terms of the bill. So from our side, we think that we've been consulted heavily with regards to this bill. Over 10 years, I would say. We've seen the previous drafts of the bill and also had input into those together with BUSA. So our comment, sometimes you comment into something because you just want to trash it or you want to be against it. Our comment is mostly supportive with regards to this bill. And why I say that it's because we currently have challenges that we think if you were to create a regulator, those challenges would be sorted out. So I'll just go about the presentation, which I will submit to Valerie later. So as the Minerals Council, we are a mining industry employers organization that supports and promotes the South African mining industry. We serve our members and promote their interests by providing strategic support and advisory unit. We facilitate interaction among members to examine policy issues and other matters of mutual concern to crystallize and define desirable industry standpoints. And we act as a principal advocate to government, to state-owned enterprises, communicating major policies endorsed by our members. We represent the industry internationally. In some sectors, we undertake collective bargaining with organized labor on behalf of our members, mainly in the coal and the platinum sectors. The Minerals Council has about 78 members. In the past, we have been found lacking with regards to having medium and small enterprises. We have now started a small-scale mining sort of department within the Minerals Council, where we now allowing smaller mines to join the Minerals Council at a lesser fee than what an Anglo would pay. We represent about 90% of the South African mineral production, and the mining industry employs about 464,000 employees, and 126 billion is paid to those employees. Our vision, I won't go to the mission and values, but our vision is to ensure that mining matters for South Africa, and we are on the front foot. As an organization, we were started back in 1887. We were started because of the diamond industry that had just started, and we were started because of the gold industry in Johannesburg that had just started then. And there's just one interesting factor that, you know, the first registered mine is actually not in Johannesburg. It is in Limpopo. It's called Eerstelen in the town of Mokopane, next to Makapansgat. My presentation also goes to explain some of our departments, but we've got mainly we've got safety, we've got all the departments that you would normally have at a mine, so that we are able to discuss the issues that come up from those departments. The Minerals Council welcomes the opportunity to comment on the economic regulation of transport, which has been long awaited. We have previously commented into the bill, and the process has been inclusive. In terms of transport in general, when you take all the mining commodities, it contributes about 12.3% into our total cost structure, which is about 70.7 billion annually. And this is only comparable probably to things like employees, as that cost is about 26%. In 2019, the cost of transporting manganese increased by 8.15%, which is significantly above producer inflation of 4.7, which is why something that we say, when you have a regulator, you would sort of believe that they would come in there and they would look at inflation related pricing. There is limited rail and port capacity, which results in the use of road and international ports, roads and international ports, which increases cost. Although it's policy from the government that sets about, so policy is there basically, but your regulator can ensure that that policy is followed in terms of extending the capacity of the rail, as we've got a lot of commodities moving on the road, which increases price. For manganese cost, it increases price by about 25%. Over the last decade, the manganese cost of logistics have doubled, and their largest input sector is transport at 34%. Remember, it said in total it's about 12.3% the total cost. But in there, you've got things like gold and diamonds that doesn't need that much of transportation. The minerals industry uses railroad and our ports to deliver their products to customers. Transport costs to mining are set at 12.3%. Transnet freight rail transported about 226 million tons of ore in 2018, which is very, very, very large. And you would want this to increase so that you can carry out the strategies that the president talked through in terms of making sure that you employ more people and you reinvigorate our economy. In terms of rail, the minerals industry transports about 70 million tons of coal on the Transnet freight railway line to Richards Bay. The port there has got a capacity to do more, so we could actually do more. Some of this coal is actually diverted into Maputo on road. About 60 million tons of coal is also transported on roads, which is a very big challenge in the Mpumalanga, Gauteng region, that you transport about 60 million tons on road. And we believe that if you have a regulator in terms of the regulator on transport and the regulator on the other side on electricity, this could be sorted out. Yes. 17 million tons of chromite and ferrochrome is also transported annually, mainly on roads and some on rail. And the minerals industry also transports over 60 million tons of iron ore on the iron ore line to Saldanha, and an additional 10 million tons of those also transported on the roads, which makes it more costly. You have also other rocks and other minerals like granite, which are also transported. So basically with this, I was trying to paint how the transport affects mining. And the biggest offtake from this is that we are competing with countries like Australia, which are more closer to Asia, and they wouldn't have as high transport costs as us. And by saying that, I'm saying, look, if it's more costly for a company in South Africa to transport that or to a country like China, they might lose shop because they are not able to compete with a country in Australia, for instance. So it's very critical that we have a regulator in transport that is impartial and will make decisions that will ensure that our industries are sustainable. Then there's so I now go on to the comments themselves. On chapter 2, there's access to rail infrastructure, type of access request and access fees. Request to make investment in order to increase the capacity of infrastructure. That has been determined in terms of section 4, where the owner of said infrastructure has declined to make the requested investment to the requested specification. This clause will enable customers of all branch lines which have been left in a condition of deterioration to be able to negotiate with the infrastructure owner to rehabilitate these facilities in return for offtake capacity. It also allows for new capacity or extension, which is supported by the Minerals Council. So we see this clause as enabling us to be also be in a private-public partnership with Transnet or any SOE that's in the transport space to be able to boost our economy. The other clause is request for and consideration of access approval by the regulator. Before approaching the regulator, an access seeker must firstly try to negotiate the terms of the access agreement with an infrastructure owner in good faith. That's 8.1. 8.2, if the parties fail to reach an agreement, either party can refer the matter to the regulator for resolution. When considering the matter referred to the regulator in terms of subsection 2, the regulator must invite the infrastructure owner and access seeker to make written representations to the regulator. This, so our comment there is this, this enables a fair resolution in case the access seeker does not agree with some of the contract conditions set by the infrastructure owner. This will greatly assist in ensuring that contracts are competitive and enable South African companies to deliver products that can compete globally and locally. The Minerals Council supports this clause and there's no changes required. So like I said, we've gone through this and we see it as a positive bill. In terms of clause number 5, when determining whether there is available capacity in the infrastructure facility, the regulator must request written representation from all entities that are currently using the infrastructure or facility, detailing the most recent history of utilization of the infrastructure or facility and the projected volumes for the ensuing year, and substantiating the said projections where possible with a written evidence. So our comment on this one is that there might be infrastructure that has not been used for some time, but might offer competitivity to sectors including farming and mining. The hope is that this clause does not exclude this infrastructure from being approved for use due to the request for recent use. So it might have not been used, it might have changed hands, but there might be another company that has just bought that particular mine and would like to use it, but they do not have the stats with regards to that particular rail infrastructure or any type of infrastructure. Rehabilitated and used sustainably. It is thus requested that a sentence bullet allowing for the use or approval of such infrastructure to be added. What comes to mind is the branch lines that have not been used and might be used economically, also supporting government strategies of moving some cargo away from roads and onto rail. So our wording proposal in terms of that one, I just said it is thus requested that a sentence of bullet allowing for the use of approval of such infrastructure to be added. I can add maybe if allowed by Friday, maybe just suggest a bullet change in terms of this. We received the request from Valerie for the wedding proposal last week, and we hadn't considered how to structure a sentence like that one, but I can always do it before Friday and submit to the committee. The infrastructure owner must provide the regulator with an updated report of capacity, including maintenance, downtime requirements, technical specification, route schematics, investment plans on the route, and any other information that the regulator may need to assess the capacity. So here, my question is the regulator going to have an overseeing capacity to ensure that the above maintenance and investments are carried out? This has been a major downfall of our SOEs for the past 10 years. The regulator should be able to hold the infrastructure owner accountable for environment, and this might collaboration with the safety regulator. With this one, we're supporting what the bill intends to do, but we just also saying that so if you look at NERSA, they have been found wanting sometimes, and it's sometimes due to their capacitations. So the regulator is to be properly staffed to ensure that they are able to fully consider the reports and make assessments of whether they are operating within the parameters prescribed, and if not, to react quickly. Because if you do not have the capacity, you might only get to those reports in 2 years' time, and that particular SOE or company has been operating inefficiently for too long, and it might be difficult to fix by then. So here I'm just saying, yes, I understand the technical specification, route schematics and those, but you also need people on the side of the regulator to be able to look at those and ensure that whatever your SOE or whatever even your private companies are giving to you is proper information, and you can also go there to go and check their books to ensure that it is what is happening. Clause 8.7, the regulator may reassign unused capacity if there is no reasonable prospect of the current user needing the capacity, and if doing so will improve system efficiency. There is no, we accept this one, and there is no comment on this one. There has been instances where real capacity has been taken away from, so we totally agree with the statement, but would also like to say that there has been instances where real capacity has been taken away from mining companies for the benefit of newcomer or smaller mines. It's got all the good intentions in it, but the challenge is that you're taking that away from an operating company, and that company would suffer consequences in that they would have to restructure. You would lose some of the investors, you'd also lose employees. So I'm saying I like what we're saying, we like what that statement is saying, that we basically can grow the capacity and not take away from the existing producers. Enablement of new entrants and smaller companies is supported by the Minerals Council, but should not be at the peril of existing companies that are contributing positively to South Africa. Instead, we should aim at increasing the capacity to empower all customers and grow the economy. So we generally not requesting any wording changes and support that clause. Decision on access approval. The regulator may grant access approval even if the requirements of Section 8.4 are not met, provided that the access seeker has given a written undertaking to the regulator to fund the requirement investment infrastructure. If the regulator grants access approval in terms of subsection 2, the terms of the access agreement must reasonably allow for the access seeker to realize the value of its investment. The regulator may grant access to the access seeker contemplated in section 2 only once the new infrastructure or facility is built. This it's supported with just a concern that when you say only once the new infrastructure or facility is built, you know, if you're looking for funding from a bank, the bank would basically require that you have a license, you have approval from the regulator to build that particular rail before we give you the financing. So without that access approval, you might find that banks are also not willing to give the funding. So we've got a concern with that statement, and I think I will also subject maybe a proposed wording for this particular one. on only once the new infrastructure or facility is built. And then on chapter 3, economic regulation of transport facilities and services, part A, price regulation, it's 11.1 up to 4. When considering a proposal submitted in terms of this section, the regulator must consult with interested parties and public in the prescribed manner, determine whether the proposal is fair and reasonable after considering all relevant circumstances, including the regulated entities' operating efficiency and effectiveness, the need for investment and security of supply in the regulated market, the opportunity cost of capital, including the average rate of return on other domestic or international facilities or services having similar comparable risk, the actual or forecast cost of debt. So what is happening at NERSA. We are fully supportive of what you have written down there as the bill, but there's just the general concern that our SOEs are ridden with high employee cost. Studies have shown with ESCOM. There has been fraudulent activities, which are currently a lot of them in the news, and generally inefficiencies, as has been exposed in the past 2 years with that particular SOE. It is thus of high importance to ensure that the regulator has got the teeth with regards to dealing with regulation 11.4, 11.1 up to 4. A simple example is the issue of ESCOM, where capital projects Medupi started at about 60 billion and eventually ending up at about 200 billion. They are coming in late, resulting in excessive debt. The overstaffing is estimated to be about 30%. Such results in efficiencies being removed and customers use other means, resulting in a death spiral for the service provider. So if you have such conditions, for instance, in a rail company, companies will end up using road, although it's more expensive, but you know that you can get the product where you want it quickly. So for electricity, we have the multi-year price determination, which has worked in any efficiencies into calculation of revenue, which has resulted in a price escalation of about 500% in terms of the electricity cost for the past 10 years. I mean, you do have the formula. The formula is good, but the problem is the information that goes into that formula. I mean, for our operations, you need some sort of certainty. So mining operations can have lives of about 25 years, and you'll find that some of them will basically get their payback or pay back their debt in 10 years' time. And that's a long period of time. And during that time, you also need you need certainty in terms of your cost inputs to say, look, it's gonna be inflation related. And then you can put those into plans and have a forward-looking plan for your operation. That particular formula in terms of the MYPD formula, depending on what the company inputs in there, can be manipulated to suit the SOE. So our concern is that when these formulas are then in the future created by the regulator, we should put that in mind to ensure that our rail and other and ports remain competitive. Yeah, and so I went on more about the negatives that we've seen in terms of the electricity regulator. The regulator should also ensure that they receive relevant data from service providers. The regulator should also be properly staffed to decipher the information supplied and be able to take decisions that will be implemented by the service provider. The cost of transport and its efficiencies can lead to our companies being able to compete with international companies, which are mostly close to their customers. It is thus critical for the South African transport industry to be as efficient as possible to keep their current contracts and grow their market share, as we are heavily endowed with products that come out of the earth. I mean, we've got more than 75% of the chrome and manganese reserves in this country. But if you look at the market, we're contributing about 46%. So we are not yet on where we should be. And we see this regulator coming online as something that can enable that. So for this one, we stated our concerns. There's generally no waiting proposal. What is there is enough to address this issue. Part B, economic oversight of regulated entities, information from regulated entities, that's 13.1. Each regulated entity must submit to the regulator in the prescribed manner and form the information that is required. It is of high importance for the regulator to have periodic reports from regulated service providers to ensure that the regulator is aware of any changes to the approved revenue streams or capacities that are supposed to be moved for that year. It is also of high importance to ensure that the regulator is properly staffed to interpret such information. The regulator should be able to implement fines if the information is not forwarded by the regulated entities. And with this one, there has been a NERSA decision that has been reversed because they did not have enough information from Eskom to have made the decision. Although it was reinstated, the regulator's decision, but there was that effect of the revenue coming in late for the SOE, which you don't want that to happen, as it means that you put in that increase on top of another increase and will have double-digit increases. So it's very important that we do have that information from our SOEs and any company that's operating in the transport phase. An addition of periodic reports and imposing fines in such if such information is not supplied should be added to this clause to ensure that the regulator has some power with regards to the supply of information. So with regards to this one, I can propose wording, and we'll submit that by Friday to Valerie. Regulatory, accounting, and disclosure requirements. It is of high importance for the regulator to have periodic reports from regulated services. No, this is a repeat of the past one. Number 15, clause number 15, complaints against regulated entities and direct referrals to council. The Minerals Council supports these regulations as they offer dispute resolutions, and there is no changes required there. Clause 29, number 1 up to number 4, establishment of transport economic regulator. The importance of an independent regulator that is also impartial cannot be overstated to ensure that the decisions taken are based on sound technical information and policies that have been set and approved by your Department of Transport or the government. This clause empowers the board to make decisions which is supported by the Minerals Council, and there's no change required in terms of this one. The Minerals Council supports the economic regulation of transport and looks forward to its implementation. And like we said, we have been participating with the DOT. They would come and they would seek information from us, ask questions. If they wanted to, they would then go and meet with the particular mines themselves, either the manganese or coal mines. They would do that. So we have a feeling that there has been proper consultation even before we got to this bill position. There has been previous comments, I think in 2018, that we have participated in, and in general think that we generally think that this bill looks good, and we actually looking forward to its implementation. Thank you, Chairperson.
Baba Christian Dave.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I hope your expectation is to get some questions, comments from the members. And if that is the expectation, you are at the right place.
Okay.
We'll allow members now to actually do that. But before they do that, let me appreciate your efforts of sharing with us your thinking about this bill. The good that is there and the concerns, as we are saying, when you go to the bank, this is what the bank will normally expect from you to have as a concern. I think we have been listening thoroughly. At this point in time, let me allow my hands on the screen. Any hand? Anybody who wants to ask a question? Lawrence McDonald, Honorable McD, Honorable Honsinger, and then who's the other one? Where is Honorable Pete May? Are you asking a question there?
No, thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Makosini Shabangu, Honorable Sir. No. Okay, the third one would be Menolu Chungu. Those are the three hands I have. Okay, Honorable McD.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank Mr. Christian Lefer for his presentation. And on a lighter note, Christian is one of our family names in my family. My father has a couple of my family members. So he must be family of mine. I just have a couple of comments, specifically their comments on state-owned enterprises, where basically saying that it's too expensive to do business with state-owned enterprises, and I want to, from a Minerals Council, this bill apart, why can't the Minerals Council assist and help Transnet or Prasa, for an example, so that we can get these manganese trucks, because already the cost has increased by over 50%, which is 34%, as he alluded to, in transport cost. But what is the real cost of the destruction of our roads with all these heavy metals on the road, especially manganese and coal, that are transported daily on our roads and destroying our billions and billions of rands of roads in this country? And is there not a better way of taking hands with these state-owned enterprises and making sure that number one, they are price competitive, and secondly, that these minerals get off the road and onto rail? Chair, that's my only submission. I thank you very much, Chair. Okay.
There you are. Honorable Hansinger.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, Mr. Christian Tefu, for your submission. I I have a burning question which might not be related to the regulator, but it connects to what my colleague just mentioned. You know, currently we have a split of 96% road and 4% rail transport. And of that, different ores and dusts and mining products are the ones being transported, as I said, to an extent of 96% of total freight on road. You know, what are the difficulties that you are experiencing from the council side in not being successful clearly to get this on rail? Because surely this is something that we can also assist with, and I would like you to share your ideas, because it definitely relates to this envisaged bill as a bill which seeks to develop some intervention in fixing our economy and getting to prosperous growth and development for the future. It seeks to address imbalances. It seeks to correct the important competitive edge, which we as a country need in order to be a global competitor. So another question then to you, sir, in relation to the millions of tons which you've shared with us of mining activity. How do you think the regulator, in practical terms, can play a role towards this competitive edge? Because two elements come to mind, the one of sustainability and the one of impartiality. Because there are concerns. On the one hand, we have a legislative concern because there's a lot of mention about overlap from the current competitions commission. However, on the state-owned enterprise side, there is a need for a regulator like we are currently developing. So what are your comments on how this regulator can, in fact, in practical ways, contribute in intervening so that we, in fact, are more sustainable but attain the important market balances of impartiality? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Member Hansinger. Let's take Honorable Member Nontando.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Mineral Council South Africa for the presentation. The previous presenter raised the very same concern you raised regarding the SOEs, citing NESA as an example. But what they were asking for was that the private sector be given a free ride, something that, you know, would never happen because we've seen how some industries have colluded in price setting. Mine is just, you know, a comment because you are raising a very important point in terms of how these SOEs are operating. Hence, we see them in the state that they are in currently. You are saying, you know, there is this problem of SOEs because of the high employee costs, exorbitant fees that are being paid and then salaries, fraudulent activities, and inefficiency. And this is something that we'll need, I agree with you that this is something that we need to look into when this body is being set up. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member Meno Luchungu. Baba Christian.
Yes, thank you.
Seemingly,
thank you.
Somebody has declared that you might be a family of his.
Okay, yes, yes. So my mother is from Rustenburg, and she's got her mother was colored, and that's why I've got the name Christian. They actually removed the other A, but it started as a Christian. So that's why we have that name. Yes, in terms of the moving on the road being too expensive for the mining industry, which is Mr. Honorable McDonald and Hansiger's question. We are in constant consultation with Transnet in terms of this. There is 60 million tons on coal haul roads in Mpumalanga. That results in deaths of about 15 people on an annual basis. The mining industry alone, with all our employees, we have about 70 fatalities per year, and should say former Minister Zwane participated in ensuring that we reduce those fatalities. And we think that the 15 that we have on the roads, although it's not allocated to mining, is very high. So we have engaged Eskom in terms of this, and in terms of talks. Eskom has come out with an idea that we could start branch lines. We could containerize the coal that comes in to ensure that the movement by trucks is reduced to almost between 5 and 10 Ks, and most of the hauling is done on rail. There has also been talks about investing more into the bigger mines, which have been previously maybe owned by international companies, but some of them, as you've seen with the formation of Seriti, have now been bought by South African companies. So there has been talks about investing into those particular mines to ensure that you increase the capacity on those mines. But what has happened is that the mines were planned for some time, operation time. A power station is normally planned for 50 years. Some of our power stations are operating beyond 50 years. Some of them have been operated hard. When I say hard, I mean they've been operated at 90% of their capacity instead of the more average utilization factor of about 75%. So you've run them hard, and when you run them hard, it means you're depleting your resource quicker underground. And due to that, the mines are now failing to give you the 12 million tons that you're requiring from them, and they give you maybe 6, and that means you have to transport on roads. Eskom has committed to putting money down on these particular mines, and I know that the mine next to Kendall, Kutala, is going to get some investment. In Seriti, New Denmark is going to open up a new section, and that is it's partly to ensure that you reduce the reliance on roads. In terms of the Majuba Power Station, I think that is the biggest contributor in that you've got about 12 million to 14 million tons going to Majuba on a yearly basis. In the past, we did have a mine that was allocated to Majuba, but what happened is that you've got a reserve, and it has been committed. It's the right coal quality, but once you go underground to go and mine, you find that the geology doesn't allow you to mine that particular resource. So they ended up not being able to use that facility. There's some gasification going on the mine next to Majuba, but it offers very little supplies. So there was a loan amount that was received from one of the international banks to build a railway line to Majuba from the Mpumalanga side to ensure that you take away at least 8 million tons away from the roads and you put it on the rail. We're not anywhere close to that 8 million. I think we're only transporting half of that on the rail. And that's due to a lot of reasons. Some of them have been sabotaged because obviously you're tampering with other people's businesses. But some of them have also been inefficiencies. But these are some of the strategies that are currently in place to ensure that you move this coal away from the roads. In terms of the Northern Cape and the chrome, there's constant discussions between the Minerals Council executives with Transnet to ensure that we've got some movement into rail in terms of the chrome, but that would mean expansion of the railway lines. And probably you would also have to use the coal line to transport that chrome, since some of your chrome is coming out from Rustenburg and some of it from Limpopo. This also ends up with mining companies then using the Maputo corridor to basically export their coal, and the Limpopo guys are basically using trucks to go and transport there. So there is a way where you know the SOE can work with mining companies to relieve this, but it mainly includes increasing infrastructure. It has been said so many times that the rail network line to Richards Bay is less than what you can actually do at the port of Richards Bay. I think Richards Bay is sitting at 91 million tons and can get to 120 million tons. So that is something that can be done on that side to move away from this road and into rail. In terms of the Port Elizabeth, I think we with Manganese, we're taking out about 5.5 million tons out of the Eastern Cape port, and we can actually do more since we have about, I think, 17 million tons of chrome going out of the, no, it's actually double, it's about 12 of manganese going out of the country. So if we could, in a way, get a railway system that can get us there, mining companies are open to those discussions. Although we don't support roads, in terms of on roads, what we are doing also. So this is being done mostly in the Mpumalanga region, Limpopo, as in Mokalakwena, and on the Glencoe mines, and we sort of driving this to go also into the Northern Cape. So your normal trucks are 34 ton trucks. So it's legally supposed to load about 32 tons, and you get an overloading sort of allowance of 2%, I think, and it gets you to about 34. And these trucks are the old standard trucks that, you know, if it turns at a robot or anywhere, you find that it's very difficult for you. You actually have to reverse back to allow for that truck to turn there. So there's an introduction of what is called performance-based standard trucks. Those trucks can still load 34 tons that is required, but will have lesser impact on the roads, will turn better, will have more efficiencies, and the support is supported by a system called Road Transport Management System, which is a self-regulation standard within the SAPS. So with this PBS trucks, we can do 49 tons on a truck. And if you think of 30 versus 50, I mean, you've got almost 50% additional load on that particular truck. That truck is supposed to go on a set road. They have been tested and have found that per axle, the load or impact on the road is lesser. So that is one of the things that we are pushing in terms of the Minerals Council to ensure that we are safer, we are more efficient on the roads. There's currently about 234 of these trucks on the road in South Africa. and the CSIR was requested to run with this project. Currently, the only challenge is that it hasn't, so it's sort of a trial. It needs to get into law, and we are actually on a drive to get that into a law, to just say, look, even if we are transporting on the roads, we'd like to move from 100 trucks to 60 trucks, because it's unavoidable, and that will ensure that the amount of traffic is lesser. That would also come with self-regulation, because these bigger trucks go into the self-regulation regime that is a South African national standard. The other impediments that we have on transport is you know, theft. That's one biggest thing. So you get theft of cables, and with the theft of cables, you've got a stranded train. Then you've got theft of the product that is in that train. So I think if those things like proper policing on our rail lines are supported, then you'd get your product to the port quicker. Yeah, so that's mainly the input. And the other complaint that our companies have is that when you order for wagons to come. Sorry, Honorable. I've got my son here. So so the trains then arrive. They arrive late, and that's why some of the companies then go opt for the transportation on road instead of rail. But we are constantly there. Our CEO, Mr. Baxter, is very positive with regards to using state-owned infrastructure, making it more efficient and supporting it as much as we can. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Ndate Tefu. We want to thank you for making time as an organization. Do not lose focus of the progress on this bill. Would love a situation where at the end of the day, you can, with some sense of pride, point out that this was coined by our organization, and this was coined by our organization when this bill is finally enacted. So we want to appreciate the fact that you took time out to come and explain to us how you see this bill moving forward. And thank you very much for that. I normally do not take hands once I've said thank you very much, but there's an elderly person who normally sway me to listen to him, even if I don't. Let me hear Honorable Hansinger before I release you.
Thank you, Chairperson. My apologies for the intrusion, but I can recall from Mr. Tefu's submission that he mentioned in addition what he submitted, he would want to submit something else, if I heard correctly. And I just wanted to put it on record and ask the Portfolio Committee's tolerance for additional submission. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Tefu, I think I also heard that. Is that acceptable to the committee? See, and Honorable
Accepted, Chair.
Accepted. Thank you very much. Thank you, Honorable Hansinger. Muranaka Ulukuluds.
Honorable Zwani and members of the Portfolio Committee, thank you.
To say to the General Council, you have seen me, I'm still in one piece. I wish them all the best. you must keep on ensuring the safety of the people in our minds. And thank you very much for talking to you once more.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Honorable members, are you still with me?
100%, Chair, with you, 100%.
100%. Thank you very much. We have a submission ready for you and me and the portfolio committee. As I recognize the presence of Honorable Mhlonishwa Mapena on the screen, we have a submission by Trax Shin. Richard Baxey, if I'm correct, that's the name of the person who will be presenting. Am I correct, sir?
Our CEO, James Holly, will be presenting. Just not sure if he's on the line yet.
Richard, thank you. I am here. Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity. And to all those who are attending this, thank you very much. We really, really appreciate the opportunity to be presenting to Parliament. I will be sharing a presentation with the committee. Can you just give me 2 minutes and I'll load 1 minute and I'll load the presentation.
Thank you very much. I will carelessly cut against that 1 minute. I've started counting.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. That's me waiting to enter. If you can just please admit me, then I can share the presentation.
Okay, no, I'm waiting patiently, sir.
Mr. Chair, can you see the presentation?
I can see clearly now. The presentation is on the screen after 1 minute, and I allow you to submit, sir. Allow.
Hello. Okay, thank you very much. Just by way of introduction, I will start with an introduction to our company, which is Traction. I'll then go through, take you through some general comments that we have to the bill. I'll talk through a comment that we have on pricing methodology. I'll discuss comments we have on the socio-economic impact, barriers to entry, comment on the rail safety regulator, comment on linkages to neighboring states, and then finally some concluding remarks. So a brief introduction to Traction. Traction is a 33-year-old private rail freight operator. We operate in 6 countries in the region. Our head office is based in Rosebank. Our main is based in Roslyn and Pretoria. So the point being, while we do operate in 6 countries in the region, we do see ourselves very much as a South African company. We own a fleet of more than 55 locomotives and more than 200 wagons. Including our third-party maintenance contracts, we maintain more than 120 locomotives and 650 wagons on a daily basis. We employ more than 430 employees across all of our regions. The various sites where we operate haul more than 30 million tons of freight per annum. We are 49.9% black-owned, level 3 BEE contributor in terms of our scorecard. We're the only ISO 9001:2015 certified rail operator that we know of on the continent. We have a lost time injury frequency rate of 0, which is the equivalent to a 5-star safety rating. We are a current RSR permit holder. We have an in-house rail school, which is both QCTO and TITA accredited. And through our rail school, we have trained more than 500 trained drivers and 55 Red Seal locomotive technicians. We have a community program on the training of our people where we take semi-skilled technicians from our local community, and then we put them through this 3-year training course to turn them into highly qualified locomotive technicians. Red Seal is obviously the highest qualification available for technicians. We have invested more than 600 million rand in the last 3 years into growth in our various operations. A little bit more about our operations. As a private freight train operator, Traction either operates now or has operated in the past in Tanzania, Zambia. That's 1,975 kilometers between Dar es Salaam and Ndola. We have operated in Mozambique on the Beira corridor. We have operated in the DRC, and we have operated in Swaziland. We operate in about 20 sites across the 6 countries in which we do operate, and we have customer relationships with a number, let me say, of South Africa's big mining companies and South Africa's big industrials. So to move on to our comment, to start with general comment, to be very clear, we would wish to say that Traction is broadly in support of this bill. Traction does consider this bill in relation to the National Reconstruction and Recovery Plan that was announced by President Ramaphosa about 2 weeks ago, the draft white paper, International Rail Policy, and the National Treasury Inclusive Growth Policy Paper that was released last year. The reason why we refer to all of those is that Traction is in support of national government's intention to allow private operators to gain access to the core network in South Africa. Subject to the concluding of access agreements, Traction has shareholder support for a 1.5 billion rand locomotive and wagon build program that we will trigger immediately on conclusion of those access agreements. Our shareholders do have significant access to capital. One of our shareholders, as an example, is the Pan African Infrastructure Development Fund, which is a circa 15-year-old and billion-dollar infrastructure fund, which provides us with this capital to actually make meaningful investments into the South African rail environment and the rail industry. We are keenly aware that effective economic regulation is required to effectively implement the planned revisions to the rail policy in South Africa, and we are also very aware that everything that government is proposing in terms of both the changes in rail policy in future as well as economic regulation to follow international best practice. So to continue on with our general comment, we feel that South Africa has a very deep rail history and heritage. We have 160 years of history in the rail industry in South Africa. The first train ran in South Africa in about 1860. We have 36,000 kilometers of installed track, which is in the region of 80% of the entire installed base of the African continent. South Africa has implemented breakthrough technologies in our railways that are now adopted internationally. Those include distributed power and running the longest trains in the world at varying times. There is and the other point is that there is significant extra capacity in the rail network that's lying idle. And what we mean by that is that there is rail track in South Africa that will be handling a small percentage of the total amount of freight that rail track could potentially handle. And that, we believe, creates a significant opportunity. To put into perspective what this 36,000 kilometers of installed track actually means, it would cost approximately 1.5 trillion rand to replace that network infrastructure if we wanted to do so today. So whereas countries like Kenya and Tanzania and Ghana are embarking on huge capital expenditure programs to install rail infrastructure, in South Africa we have the luxury of not having to do that because we have this huge already installed base. Moving on, Traction believes that granting private operators access to the core network is a real win-win for South Africa, and we really are behind government's intentions on this front. Firstly, we believe it will generate access fees to strengthen Transnet's position. That's really leveraging this latent capacity that exists in the track network. Secondly, it will bring significant investment from private investors to grow South Africa's rail manufacturing base. Also, of course, bearing in mind that South Africa has been selected in terms of the African Union as the manufacturing base for the rail industry on the continent. We believe it will stimulate general economic growth by growing rail capacity and improving the competitiveness of the South African economy, which is perhaps, and in fact, without a doubt in our minds, the greatest benefit that would come from allowing private operators to operate alongside Transnet and complementary to Transnet. It will reduce greenhouse gases by up to 3.5 times due to the efficiency, the carbon efficiency of the rail sector. And it will reduce road damage, supporting government's aim of road-to-rail conversion. And in order for freight operators like ourselves to operate alongside Transnet, it requires absolutely no privatization of any element of Transnet or at all. So that's our general comment. Mr. Chair, I don't know if you want me to continue and conclude my presentation, or if you would like to take questions as I'm going along. Okay, I think let me continue. The pricing methodology, the comment that we would like to raise is price controls on underutilized lines, we believe, should be based on feasible rands per ton per kilometer rates, rather than only the cost of operating, maintaining, and improving the lines. And that's until such time as they reach a sustainable revenue stream. Now, the reason for that is where there's a fixed cost associated with maintaining rail track. And in order to attract rail volumes to that section of track, we believe that it needs to be a feasible rate that applies. If I can just use a very crude example there, if there is a section of track that requires, let's say, R1 million per year to maintain that section of track, if you only move 1 ton across that section of track, then that first ton, theoretically would have to pay R1 million to access that section of track. However, if you had 1 million tons on that section of track, you would only, each ton would have to pay R1 to move over that section of track. What we're concerned about is that if, in order to attract volumes to lines that are currently underutilized, the price controls on underutilized lines need to be based on feasible rands per ton per kilometer rates, rather than looking at each line as its own business case. We believe that high access fees must not make the operations unfeasible compared to other forms of transport, and that's particularly with a view to stimulating rail volumes to enter onto those lines, so that those lines have the opportunity to become sustainable. The other comment that we would like to raise and make in this line is that sunk costs for our installed track base should be for the national benefit. We have as South Africa, we have the benefit of having this incredible heritage of a huge installed rail base, and we do believe that should be for the national benefit. And by that, what we mean is that when the regulator considers what the access fee should be, the regulator should consider maintenance, and that's heavy and ongoing maintenance should be included. But a return on the capital of that installed base should be for the national benefit in terms of reducing the cost of transport in South Africa and stimulating general economic growth. On the socio-economic element, and this is addressed in the document that is included that was circulated alongside the bill. In section 2.4, it mentions that TFR and TPT may not be included at inception. We believe that TPT and TFR should be included at inception. They hold such a market dominant position in the transport sector that they certainly should be included from inception. We believe that one of the focuses of this bill should be addressing the barriers to entry. We fully support that the Act seeks to promote general economic growth. We would like to also stress that the rail sector in South Africa is under significant duress at the moment, and that's due to a spending pullback from the SOEs over the last few years. A healthy rail, and we believe that a healthy rail chain provides the foundations for successful freight operations, and that we believe that, and in light of this, we believe that dropping the barriers to entry are key to a healthy rail value chain. We did, interestingly, do a presentation at the Africa Rail Conference 2 weeks ago on barriers to entry, and in coming to this, we did various interviews across the rail value chain, across the various different subsectors of our industry, and in short, the outcomes of this were that the key barriers to entry that is perceived by participants in the industry is firstly corruption and irregular procurement, unpredictable procurement patterns, and what that means is that there could be a huge lump sum procurement in 1 year and then 5 years of no procurement, which limits the ability to generate a sustainable industry. The limiting contracting terms, as and when contracts, short-term contracts, and return policies included within some of the contracting terms from the big dominant SOEs. The market dominance of Transnet and PRASA was also raised as a barrier to entry. High capital cost of our industries, skills shortages, limited access to funding in our industry was also considered a key barrier to entry. The high levels of regulation has been raised as a barrier to entry. However, we do wish to raise a flag on that. Safety regulation is critical to a successful rail industry, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to have high levels of regulation. But nonetheless, a consequence of that is a barrier to entry. And then finally, due to the vandalism that we have seen over the lockdown period, there is increasingly a concern raised regarding the condition of the infrastructure. We would like to raise a comment on the rail safety regulator. We are very much in favour of the railway safety regulator remaining in its present form, and that is to ensure an equitable safety standard for all operators. Rail safety, we believe, is a niche area of expertise, and we do believe that the rail safety regulator in its current form is well placed to continue to perform this function. We would like to also raise a comment that we believe that the high incidence of derailments and accidents that we have seen in the recent past is not a matter of poor regulation. The next comment we'd like to raise is on linkages to the neighbouring states. Traction believes that rail will improve our linkages to SADC countries and by speeding up customs and border controls. Delays and queues waste money and constrain our economy. What we would like to ask is that the committee consider whether it is appropriate that the bill considers this within the scope of the bill. We do believe that this connectivity with the region is something that will both stimulate our rail industry and also have a significant knock-on benefit for the broader South African economy. So some concluding comments. So firstly, Traction is in support of the submissions made by the Railroad Association to this committee last week. We believe that in paragraph, and these are comments that I'm raising now, if you will, Mr. Chair, in addition to our initial submission, that we would like to include. Traction believes that in paragraph 4.2, the 70% threshold of applicability of the Act should apply sectorally, and therefore, and what we mean by that is to the road, rail and ports industry separately. It should not apply to, we don't believe it should apply to a specific service within a sector, and therefore the movement of a niche product should not be deemed to be a service. So really there, I think what we're raising is we're making 2 points. The first is that rail should be seen as a sector, roads should be seen as a sector, and ports should be seen as a sector. If all transport movements are seen as one big sector, we could have a situation where Transnet, for example, may be unregulated because they, in terms of the total market share, they fall under the 70% threshold. Whereas on the rail sector movements, on the main, they effectively, they would fall more than 95%. If you look at it as the whole freight market, they could fall under the 70% threshold, which we don't understand we don't believe is the intention of the bill. So we do think that should be clarified. The other comment we would like to raise is that this legislation, we do believe and we understand it is the intention, but we'd like to make the comment, needs to be developed with a view and in congruence with the national rail policy. And then finally, with the announcements that have been made by government, we'd like to make the comment that this is a transformative time for the rail industry. And we would like to support the Railroad Association's proposal to form a rail sector task team to align the interests of industry at this time of transformation in the rail industry in South Africa. Once again, thank you very, very much for this opportunity to present to you, Mr. Chair. We really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much. That was a presentation from Traction, as they call it.
Great.
Let me, at this point in time, say, fulfill your expectation of having some comments, questions from members. I will allow members to ask questions. I can see the hand of Honorable Onsinger. Who's the next? Okay, Honorable Onsinger.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, Mr. Baxi. Am I audible?
I can hear it.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. Baxi, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Right. Thank you again for your presentation. In one of the earlier slides, I did not get the slide number, but you made the remark that TFR and TPT should be included and therefore not excluded. And I would like to hear your justification for those remarks, since I think your remarks can give us some insight into the current domination, but then the attempt to balance out the intention of a regulated future environment. I also appreciated your slide. I think it was slide number 16, where you listed the barriers for entry. And it was quite interesting that 6 to 7 out of the 9 elements that you highlighted there includes a role and function of the future regulator. And I would also encourage your submission around those barriers in a way which could expand the regulator's role to then make it easier for involvement in the future. Then I would also like to ask you a question around the railway safety regulator's role and your interesting remark that you prefer the railway regulator to remain in the form which it currently is operating in. And I want to ask you a specific question then. Given that the railway safety regulator currently is a fine-based approach, in other words, when there's a transgression or a reason for intervention because of unsafe conditions, they would fine a particular rail participant, thereby generating revenue rather than to prioritize the safety. So in other words, one could then easily just pay the fine, which would still not make the conditions safe. You would again be fined, and again you can just pay the fine. It would not ultimately contribute in a sustainable way in making the rail environment safer on a revenue stream basis. In fact, the railway safety regulators' income nearly doubled over the past 3 years, given the bad state of our mainly PRASA lines, and the cash reserves nearly doubled in the past 3 years. So our railway system as such is getting more unsafe, and the railway safety regulator is getting richer. So are you still in favor of a fine-based approach? And are you totally convinced that the railway safety regulator should remain in the current status that it is? My last question, Chairperson, to Taxon would be the remark more or less at the end where you refer to national rail policy. And I would like to know which aspects in particular would you want to have aligned with the further development of this bill. Hence, you made a remark that improved alignment should be maintained with the national rail policy. Thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable Hansinger, you were asking on behalf of the committee. I can see your hand was the only hand. If that is the case, let me allow Mr. Baxi to respond to what you have just requested him to respond on. Mr. Baxi, I can see you are still with us.
The person that's presenting for Traction is our CEO. He's Mr. James Holly. he will respond.
Mr. James Hawley. Can you respond, sir?
Yes.
That sound will suit me if I play my keyboard. What is happening with that sound? Hello? Can anyone hear me, Mr. Baxi or James?
James, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, excellent.
Let's get a response from you or James Hawley.
Mr. Chair, can you hear me now?
I can hear you clearly now.
Okay, thank you very much. I think if I could deal with the first part of the question was on the socio-economic impact element. On that element, the question was, should Transnet and should the TFR and TPT be included? We believe that they should most certainly be included. They hold such a market dominant position that it would defeat the intentions of having effective transport price regulation or economic regulation in the absence of including them from the very beginning. We think it was a point of clarity in there and potentially that we may be reading it incorrectly, because we can't see that there's any point really to an effective transport economic regulator without considering and including Transnet and TPT and TFR. So that's the on the socio-economic impact element. On the barriers to entry to the industry, you know, the one comment that we would like to raise there is that the rail value chain, which is obviously the sector that we exist in within this the sort of broader transport context, really exists because we move freight and because we move commuters. We're a freight operator only, and commuter rail is an element that we don't talk to, and it's because we're a freight operator. But when you consider that moving freight is what makes the whole rail value chain successful, introducing additional operators and growing the freight, it then follows, and it's easily understandable that introducing other operators then increases the whole value chain, and in so doing would be a huge lever to unlock barriers to entry and participation in the rail industry by the broader South African economy. So that's my comment on your question on barriers to entry, or your comment on barriers to entry. In terms of the rail safety regulator, you asked whether firstly, we believe as Traction that the fines that the rail safety regulator impose are an effective lever to ensure compliance. We very much do believe so. The fines that they impose on us, we haven't actually incurred a fine, but the fines that they have in their power to incur on us are certainly a very strong consideration for us in our business, in what we talk about in our safety meetings and in our compliance meetings. And I do believe it's a very strong stick to ensure compliance with the regulation in our business. In what I would like to also comment on is remember that the only lever, it's not the only lever of control that the rail safety regulator has. The other lever of control they have is to suspend the license, the permit of an operator. And remembering, of course, that the rail safety regulator did suspend
the license of Shosholoza Mail at some stage earlier in this year. And that really is a huge stick that they also do wield, that I think is in favor of the rail safety regulator. Talking from as an industry participant, we believe that safety regulation that we have in South Africa is very strong. It's important to remember that regulation can only do so much. It's the operators on the ground that need to deliver that regulation, and when we can't blame, we don't believe the regulator for much of what we have seen on the ground. Very often our operators are, the state operators are operating in difficult circumstances, which include vandalism of networks, which impacts on signaling systems, the integrity of track, etc. And those are just examples of some of the difficulties that the operators face. So we believe that the rail safety regulator is a strong body. We believe it's a well-equipped body, and we don't have any issues with the way that it is established at present. But we think it's a very important element, and thank you very much for raising that question, because we do appreciate the ability to be able to talk to that as an industry participant. The last element of the question that was raised was on national rail policy. Which aspects of national rail policy do we believe should be focused on? Well, the national rail policy talks to a few things. The first element of the national rail policy is the aspect of open access, which is allowing private sector operators to operate alongside Transnet and to generate access fees for Transnet, grow the position, grow the strength of Transnet, and grow the rail capacity within the South African industry. Release companies like ourselves to make really significant investments into the rail sector. And so we're very supportive of that element of open access. The national rail policy is also calling for the vertical separation of Transnet between infrastructure and operations. We believe that is international best practice, and we believe that is correct. However, we are also very aware of the complexities involved in achieving that. To separate the infrastructure, the track infrastructure out of Transnet into either a division of Transnet or into an SOE is a complicated process that we believe should be the objective of rail policy, but it needs to be acknowledged that it will be a process that will take a number of years. And what we would be very wary of is holding back the development of South Africa, holding back the ambitions of the reconstruction and recovery plan, which is calling for third-party operators onto the national network, onto the core network within the next 12 months, if we're following this ultimate ambition, which is complicated and will take time. What we believe is that the third-party operators entering onto the Transnet network, as an example, to operate freight trains, shouldn't wait for that ultimately to be delivered, but it should be the ultimate objective. And according to our knowledge, there's absolutely no reason why it should wait. Transnet, being the owner of the infrastructure, holding the rail safety regulator permit themselves, are within their right to sign these access agreements straight away, following engagement with industry on the terms in which they're going to do it. And obviously with the support of the coming regulation through this bill, which we've said we really, really support. The one element of national rail policy which we don't believe which we don't necessarily support as traction, is the intention to move from Cape gauge, which is the 106.7 gauge, to standard gauge. The reason for that is we have this enormous base in South Africa of 36,000 kilometers of track. To replace that from scratch would cost 1.5 trillion rand. Transnet have 2,500 locomotives. If we go from Cape gauge to standard gauge, we would put enormous strain on the fiscus to implement a project of that scale. And much of the 2,500 locomotives, the 70,000 odd wagons, would become completely redundant in South Africa. And we believe that, and when you consider that a new locomotive costs in the region of $3.5 million, just one locomotive costs $3.5 million, to render 2,500 of those effectively redundant would be a very, very costly exercise. Well-maintained Cape gauge track can still be operated at speeds that will make the rail industry a huge enabler for growth in South Africa. We just don't believe we need to strain the fiscus, and the fiscus can focus its attention in other areas. So thank you very much. That would be my answer to those questions.
Thank you very much. That was Mr. James Holia, am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much for the detailed response. I wish at this point to say, do keep track of this bill. Would want you to participate up until to the end of it, but also appreciate that you took time out of your busy schedule to come and talk to us so that we know where you stand with this bill. And that is much more appreciated. Otherwise, all the best for your day-to-day activity as a company. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Really, we would be honored to have the opportunity to come and engage with yourselves on that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You are released. You can go on with your other activities now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable members, I'm sure I will be right that we're done with today's presentations. They were only 3. We are left with 2 sets of minutes, according to what I have been given. The first minutes is the minutes of the 20th of October. I've gone through those minutes. If there is any member who wants to move for the adoption of the minutes or correction, let's do so.
Chair, I move for the adoption of the October the 20th minutes.
I can see the hand of Honorable Ramadwa, Boramadwa.
And good morning, Honorable Chairperson. I raising my hand to support Honorable McD for his proposal on the adoption of the minutes.
Do we have any matters arising on this minutes of the 20th? Honorable McDonald?
Chair, from the matters arising, can we start scheduling meetings for the subcommittee on the Public Protector's report on the quantums, Chair? It's up to your prerogative to instruct the Secretary to start scheduling meetings for the subcommittee, Chair.
Can we get to a point where we're saying, as you raise that matter now, can we get to a point of saying there was something left on the to what do I call it, point of reference for the subcommittee that we're supposed to deal with today and finish so that the subcommittee can sit. Members?
I'm in agreement with you, Chair.
Can we quickly do that? Because the last time members were asked about this matter, members requested for time to go through the this point, what do you call it? Let's hear Honorable Hansinger.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I want to suggest that we accept the circulated document which reflects the term of reference for this particular subcommittee's work mandated by the principal committee, but that we in addition allow for the inclusion of ambulances and also the inclusion of investigation of other vehicles. Since the subcommittee's primary objective is not to investigate the report, but to investigate the phenomenon of converted vehicles. So my suggestion is that we accept the term of reference as circulated, but that we include ambulances and also other vehicles. The reason for this, Chairperson, is that ambulances were not mentioned at all in the Public Protector's report, and that the phenomenon of converted panel vans to ambulances then involves all our hospitals and medical emergency stakeholders who have purchased these vehicles, which pose a huge risk. The motivation behind the request to also include other vehicles is because other vehicles, like for instance a Ford Transporter, has been taken to the traffic department in Durban in an attempt to register 70 of these vehicles to transport laborers on the back of these vehicles. So that is the reason why I'm requesting that we do not limit this investigation to Toyota Quantums, but that we widen the scope in the form of a mandate from the principal committee to also include other vehicle makes other than just Toyotas. So my request therefore, Chairperson, firstly, is that we accept the circulated document as a term of reference, but that we in addition include the investigation into ambulances and also other vehicles. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Hansinger. Any other hand on this matter? Any other take, honorable members? Boramadwa, and then Honorable McD.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. I second what Honorable Hunsinger was saying, because when the subcommittee is doing its work, sometimes they'll find that there are issues that they need to investigate, which were not in the terms of reference. I think we need to mandate them when they are doing their work, so that if there is a need, they must do to other vehicles, not necessarily vehicles, on all the issues that they will find it to be necessary to interview or to investigate. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Boramadwa. You can now lower your hand. Honorable Lawrence McDonald, did you want to say something?
Yes, Chairs, I just wanted to say what Honorable Ramatwa has already alluded to. that I'm not vehemently in disagreement with what Honorable Hansinger said, and then we support that we can then investigate other forms of transport that was illegally converted for the purpose of public transport. Check.
Okay. Once you guys have terms of reference, you can now meet. All right. Thank you very much. I take it that everybody who has not spoken agree with this view that we should adopt the terms of reference as circulated, but the scope should extend to ambulances and other vehicles. Is there anybody who's against it? Are we all in unison agreeing with this? Okay, thank you very much. Let's tackle the minutes of the 21st, where our first presenter was the City of Cape Town, MEC there for City of Cape Town, followed by Gautrain. I have also gone through those minutes. Anybody who moves for adoption of the minutes?
Chair, Honorable MacDonald moves. You are muted, Chair.
Oh, thank you, Honorable MacDonald. Any seconder? Anybody who wants to second?
Thank you, Chair. Chris Hunsinger, DA's seconds.
Thank you very much, Honorable Hunsinger. Any matters arising from the minutes of the 21st of October? Nothing. Okay. Valerie?
Yes, Chairperson.
The issue of the program, oversight program, can you quickly talk to it?
Yes, Chairperson, Ms. Mashlati wants to raise an issue if you want to give her a minute. We are in the process of getting quotations for accommodation transport because we have to submit it to House Chair for approval. But if you give Ms. Mashlati just chance to ask members questions in relation to the logistics, please.
With your permission, he's been given an opportunity to address this August House. Mema Sati?
Good afternoon, Chair.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you, Chair. How are you?
I'm super. Thank you.
Okay. Chair, I've sent an email to the members and support staff. I need to find out where the members will be departing from their locations as soon as possible because the flights are limited regarding the regulations. And also the return flights. If the member is returning to Joburg, maybe flying to Bloemfontein from Joburg and return to Bloemfontein to Joburg. Or either way, for example, Mayor Ramadwa, if she's departing from Cape Town, Bloemfontein, and maybe return to Polokwane. I need those details as soon as possible.
Okay.
Thank you.
You need them now, or members can talk to you on the side?
They can email me or WhatsApp me, sir.
Thank you very much. I just take it for granted that everybody has your email and your WhatsApp number. Eh?
Yes, Chair. I
Thank
will
you very
appreciate if I can receive them before Friday, if it's possible.
Members, before Friday, you should have talked to Mema Shati about this matter. Thank you very much. Mema Shati, you're done. Am I correct?
Yes, I'm done, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honorable members. We have come to the end of our meeting. According to our program, we are meeting tomorrow. Same time, same place, and not Friday. Am I correct, Valerie, that we don't have a meeting on Friday?
Chair, that is the issue that that needs to be discussed in this committee. If you may recall, SASO and Transnet was not available, and the suggestion was that the committee meet on Friday morning to hear their submissions from 9 till around 12 o'clock. Obviously, the committee has to agree, and we need to know that members are going to be available because the program is going to be very full from next week, and this is the only time for the committee to really hear those submissions.
Yeah. Honorable members, except for Honorable Hansinger, are we available, all of us, on Friday, 9 to 12?
Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I
Yes.
support. I think it would be good and proper for us to consider the submissions of them on Friday, and if possible, and everybody and most of the members are available, I support the motion that we then have submissions from them on Friday, Chair.
Thank you very much. Honorable Lansinger supports. Honorable McDonald. Honorable Lansinger will not be in. I take it, honorable members, that all other members who are with us today will be part of the meeting of Friday, 9 to 12. If anybody will not be able, you should be able to apologize right on time. Yes, remember.
Well, unfortunately, on Friday, given party-related matters which I have been assigned to deal with in my province, on Fridays, it's part of the preparations for that, which we will be concluding as we begin on Saturday and Sunday, respectively.
Okay. Honorable Mapena, you are available on Friday?
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, colleagues. Yes, I think I'll be available on Friday.
Thank you very much. Bora Matwa, are you available on Friday?
Chairperson, I'm not sure because I had to, I must change my flight because I have booked already, seeing that there was nothing on Friday. So I cannot say whether I'll be available or not because I'm still going to change my flight.
For 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock?
No, I can't because I must connect to Polokwane. The connection is at 10 o'clock from OR. So it means I'm not going to go on Friday.
You'll go on Thursday?
I'll go. I'm not sure. That's why I'm saying I'm not sure. Because if I must attend, it means I must go on Thursday. Or Saturday, there is no connecting flight.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Okay. Honorable May, are you available?
I'm available, Chairperson.
Okay. Who else have I not asked about the availability? Mefigile, are you available? Honorable Figile Kumalo. Okay, Sabiela Goye, Babu Chabang, Babu Makosi.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure because I have family response matters to attend to, but I'll see as time goes on what it is that I can do.
Okay, that is the situation we find ourselves to be. Valerie.
Person.
Let's try and schedule that meeting for Friday. I think we'll impress upon Sasol and Transnet that it is very important to take the committee also serious. Once we have allocated them space, they must use their space because we are not always readily available for people who wants to prioritize them first and prioritize the committee thereafter. I think we'll impress upon them at that particular time. Otherwise, let's schedule a meeting for Friday. Honorable member, yes, Valerie.
No, Chair, I said I'll and we will schedule the meeting.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Members, let's meet tomorrow, same time, same venue. Thank you very much for your cooperation. For this meeting, you are released to go to your different responsibilities. Please, thank you very much.